Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. We're starting today with a quote from Niels Bohr, the Nobel laureate. He said, "This idea is not crazy enough to be true."
Hmm. That's quite a quote to kick things off.
It is, right. And hold on to that thought, because we're pivoting, maybe unexpectedly, straight to Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson. Okay, intriguing.
Yeah, we're looking at a really unusual, kind of fascinating hypothesis about his life, his behaviors, some of the things that made him so unique.
Ah, okay. I think I know where this might be going. It's definitely unconventional territory.
Definitely. And fair warning to everyone listening, this deep dive explores concepts that, well, they might be new for a lot of you. We're viewing Michael's life through a very specific, esoteric lens.
Yeah, so get ready to maybe stretch your mind a bit.
Exactly.
Right, so today we're really digging into a, let's say, highly speculative theory from the material we looked at.
Highly speculative is a good way to put it.
Yeah. This viewpoint connects Michael Jackson's energetic centers, his chakras, to things like potential karmic memories and even past lives.
Past lives. Wow.
It's an extraordinary perspective, for sure. And our goal here is to explore how such a lens, this particular interpretation, might offer some, insights, however speculative, into his public image and his private actions.
It's a real what-if scenario, isn't it? Designed to make you think differently.
Absolutely. Just exploring the idea.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this wild hypothesis, we need to start with the energetic blueprint, as the source calls it.
Right, the chakras.
Yeah. So the source describes Michael Jackson's core chakras. The initial premise is that they rotated clockwise. What's the significance of that in this specific energetic framework?
Well, in this particular view, it's quite distinct. Unlike maybe counterclockwise or balanced rotations you sometimes hear about, clockwise is interpreted here as showing an evolutionary nature.
Evolutionary. Meaning
it suggests his energetic flow was geared more towards, let's say, growth and widely accepted universal human values, not necessarily revolutionary or disruptive, but evolutionary, building on things.
Okay, that's a pretty foundational idea for this whole thing then. So let's dive into the specific chakras. The source says his root chakra, the Muladhara, it was described as off-axis.
Yeah, off-axis.
If it wasn't aligned or balanced, what does that suggest about his foundation, his early life energies?
Well, according to this framework, it's a pretty significant indicator. An off-axis root chakra points towards considerable stress during his early childhood.
Right, which is something often discussed about his upbringing.
Exactly. And this stress, the source suggests, had a profound impact on his center of will. But what's really interesting is how it frames his intense purposefulness, that incredible drive he had.
Yeah, how so?
It's presented not just as, an innate talent or personality trait, but possibly as a deep compensatory mechanism for those early difficult experiences. Like he was overcompensating with his will.
Oh, right.
And the source also notes his sacral chakra, the Swadhisthana, was inactive and off-axis too. But it explicitly states it's not going into the specific pathologies there for those lower two.
Okay, so we'll follow that lead and move up to the higher centers then.
Yes, let's move up to the solar plexus, Manipura, and the heart, Anahata. These were described as incredibly potent.
Potent, right. And how did that specific combination, the strong solar plexus and heart, translate into that, undeniable public presence he had? We all felt it.
Well, this energetic blend, the source argues, was the key, absolutely crucial to his brilliant public persona and, frankly, his unparalleled fame.
So it wasn't just raw talent.
Not just talent, according to this view. It was this unique mix. A powerful solar plexus, his center of personal power and identity, combined with an even more developed heart chakra, his center for love, compassion, connection.
Okay.
That combination allowed him to connect almost instantly on a really profound, maybe even primal level with audiences, projecting that unique charisma we all remember.
That makes a certain kind of sense, energetically speaking.
Yeah.
All right, moving up again to his throat chakra.
Yeah.
The Shuddha, the voice, the expression. This is where we'd expect to see how his talent literally, burst onto the world stage, right?
Precisely. His throat chakra was apparently very well developed. The source even suggests it was comparable to, or maybe even stronger than, his solar plexus.
Really? That's strong.
Yeah. And this created the image of a talented artist literally destined for popularity. The view here is that he would have actually struggled not to be noticed. His talent, his presence, it was just too powerful to keep hidden.
Like it had to come out.
Exactly. But there's a nuance here, too. The author also points out some blocks on this chakra.
Blocks? What kind?
interpreted as childhood grievances, possibly aimed at parents or maybe other close relatives. It adds another layer, another complexity to his persona.
Hmm. Grievances affecting his expression, even with all that power.
Hmm.
Interesting. Okay, so beyond these chakras that kind of govern our daily interactions, the source goes into the higher centers.
Right. The third eye, Ajna, and the crown, Sahasrara.
And this is where things get even more unique, maybe.
Definitely more esoteric, yeah.
What's the key thing about their connections? What made them different?
Well, his third eye chakra, Ajna, is described as distinct. It wasn't apparently focused on, say, tactical thinking or willpower, which you might sometimes associate with it.
Okay, so what was it focused on?
Instead, it was described as having a direct, powerful connection to the astral world.
The astral world, like the non-physical plane,
Yeah.
dreams, spirituality, that sort of thing.
Exactly that sort of thing in this
Okay.
context. And similarly, his crown chakra, Sahasrara, which is often linked to strategic thinking and the higher astral realms, it also showed an interesting connection to something beyond the ordinary.
Interesting connection. Vague, but intriguing.
Yes, and it's these points, these connections in the higher chakras that really bridge us to the next major part of this whole hypothesis.
Right. Okay, so we've looked at the individual chakras, this energetic map. Now let's connect them to something bigger, this incarnational hypothesis.
Yes.
So the core idea here is that these energy centers, they're not just about this life, our current one. They act as conduits, like antennas.
That's a good analogy. Antennas, yeah. The hypothesis proposes that chakras don't just relate to our physical or mental states, but they also serve as connectors to various informational fields.
Informational fields, like what?
Well, the source lists things like mystical, earthly, extraterrestrial egregores, which are basically collective thought forms or group energies in this kind of esoteric thinking,
Okay.
and crucially, memories of karmic rebirths, past lives.
Okay, so that's the link. Our energy body as an antenna picking up signals from the universe or past lives.
Essentially, yes. That's the speculative idea being presented, that our energetic makeup tunes us into these wider fields of information.
So this framework then says his Ajna and Sahasrara, the third eye and crown, had this specific incarnational character, meaning his actions now weren't just driven by conscious choices in this life,
Correct.
but by deep, maybe unconscious echoes from a past existence. Is that it?
That is the absolute essence of it, yes. The author suggests that due to some unique circumstances, Michael Jackson might have retained access to memories of past lives, lives where he was someone completely different.
But not like clear movie reel memories.
No, not conscious, vivid recall, more like subconscious experiences that were just with him throughout his life.
Okay.
And the source theorizes that because he maybe lacked a framework to understand them, he might have just perceived these feelings or images as fantasies.
Just his imagination running wild.
Perhaps. But the hypothesis argues they were still a dominant factor in his actions, resonating with his current life experiences, maybe in confusing or distorted ways.
Wow, that is quite a premise. It really makes you rethink, what drives our deepest motivations or desires, doesn't it?
It certainly pushes the boundaries of conventional thinking.
Okay, let's try and use this lens, this karmic lens, to look at some of his most talked about behaviors, things that people always found puzzling.
Right, the really noticeable things.
Yeah, like his desire to change his skin color, his facial features, his attempts to stop aging almost,
Yeah.
and his unique relationships with children. The source brings in two mystical factors here.
It does. It suggests these patterns could potentially stem from one of two things, either memories of past or ancestral rebirths.
Okay, personal karmic history.
Or, interestingly, a spontaneous connection to an informational block, like tuning into a specific historical era or even a figure that wasn't necessarily part of his own direct karmic lineage.
So either his past lives or just tapping into some historical energy field.
That's the idea. It's offering this mystical framework for behaviors that often, defied easy conventional explanation, presenting them not just as eccentricities, but as possible echoes from a really profound past.
And the source then makes a very specific connection, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Beyond just his general creativity, it points strongly towards ancient Egypt.
Yes, very strongly.
How does ancient Egypt fit into this whole incarnational hypothesis?
It's quite striking, as the source points out, how often Michael's creative work, his music videos, his imagery touched on themes of mysticism, the afterlife, and very specifically used images of ancient Egypt.
That's true, yeah. The Remember the Time video comes to mind immediately.
Exactly. So building on that observable pattern, The source puts forward the hypothesis that one of his past rebirths was connected to ancient Egypt.
Connected how? Just live there or
Potentially more than that he might have been a significant figure, maybe even someone perceived as a demigod in that lifetime.
a demigod? Wow. Okay, so this ancient connection, this possible Egyptian life, could be a key to understanding some of his later life behaviors.
That's what the author suggests, yes. It's presented as a potential root cause.
So if we run with this hypothesis for a moment, how would that ancient life echo into his modern behavior? What kind of memories or feelings would he carry forward?
Well, this ancient life, if the hypothesis holds water, might have provided him with subconscious memories of past grandeur, feelings of great importance or power, and also perhaps recollections related to his appearance in that life, and maybe even memories of a long, almost ageless life.
Ageless life. Interesting. So it's like these deep imprints from a powerful past were subtly influencing his desires now, trying to recreate something from before.
That's the interpretation, that these past life echoes were driving certain present-day desires, trying to manifest attributes or conditions from that prior existence.
Which brings us to the specific interpretations of his actions. Let's start with the skin whitening, which was obviously very visible and much discussed. How does the source connect that to this supposed Egyptian past life?
Well, from this specific, very speculative viewpoint, the skin whitening could be seen as a subconscious attempt, an attempt to align his physical appearance in this life with how he perceived himself or how he was in that past life.
So maybe in that ancient Egyptian life, his appearance was different, lighter perhaps, and he was subconsciously trying to get back to that.
That's the implication offered by the source, yes.
Yeah.
That it was an attempt to bridge the perceived gap between his current reality and a past identity.
Okay. And what about his documented quest for youth?
Yeah.
The surgeries, the look.
Right. The source explains that desire to remain eternally young, suggesting it evolved almost into a cult for him.
The cult of youth.
Yeah, manifesting in the plastic surgeries, the specific costumes he wore, even though objectively they had limited effect in actually stopping aging.
So how does the past life theory explain that?
It's seen, again, through this lens as a deep, maybe karmic pull towards that perceived ageless existence from a past incarnation.
The one where he supposedly lived a very long life.
Exactly, where maybe he genuinely experienced a much longer, more enduring physical form, or at least had the memory or feeling of it. So he was trying to recapture that sense of timelessness.
Okay. And finally, his relationships with children. So obviously a very sensitive area. How does the source approach this using its framework?
It approaches it with a similar speculative angle. It suggests this particular behavior could be connected to a possible subconscious desire to retain youth.
How so?
Almost as if connecting with the energy of childhood, surrounding himself with children, was a way to subconsciously cling to that memory of agelessness, or maybe even return to a state perceived as more pure, perhaps linked to that ancient past.
I see. A way to stay young in spirit, maybe, linked to that past life.
That's one interpretation offered. It's important to note the source does mention there are other hypotheses it could explore related to past realities that might have influenced this specific behavior, but it explicitly refrains from discussing them further. So we'll do the same, sticking strictly to what the material actually presents on this point.
Understood. Sticking to the source.
Yeah.
Okay, so wrapping this section up, what does it all mean? We've gone down a pretty deep rabbit hole here.
We certainly have.
We've taken this deep dive into a really unconventional reading of Michael Jackson's energy, his chakras, potential karmic past, offering this unique, you have to admit, but yes, very speculative framework.
Highly speculative.
They're understanding his life, his art, those enigmatic behaviors. And just to reiterate for everyone listening, this entire exploration was purely about unpacking one specific author's unusual hypothesis. We're not endorsing it, just examining it.
Absolutely. Just laying out the ideas presented in the material. And if we maybe connect this back to the bigger picture for a moment, it does raise a kind of interesting question, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, the source itself mentions that old saying, history is written by the victors. And it points out how even our understanding of recent events can be so different, so varied, depending on who's telling the story.
That's definitely true. Perspective is everything.
Right. So if that's the case for recent history, if our collective memory is that malleable, then the provocative thought the source leaves us with is this. What forgotten memories or what subtle influences from truly ancient times, maybe even from supposed past lives or collective fields like the ones discussed, what might be subtly shaping our own deepest desires, our behaviors,
without us even knowing it.
without us ever really knowing why we feel drawn to certain things or repelled by others. Could there be echoes of a much deeper past influencing us all?
Wow. That is definitely a thought to ponder long after this deep dive is over.
Indeed. Food for thought.